feeling nostalgic. Let's rewatch a 90s movie.
Which one did you have in mind?
A feel-good movie from 1993. It has a happy gay couple as side characters, cross-dressing, and the happy ending involves a drag queen storytime TV show. It's about a man who becomes a better father and overall caretaker through cross-dressing.
Wait, do you mean...
Mrs Doubtfire.
The way I remember this movie, it was pretty problematic.
Oh, stop calling everything problematic. Just rewatch it with an open mind.
Fine.
2 hours later.
Oh, that was... Where do I even begin? How could I have forgotten how transphobic that one scene was? How did I forget what a horrible person the main character is?
The late Robin Williams was just that charming and brilliant at improv comedy.
Oh, that's another piece of my childhood ruined. You pick the movie next time.
Will do. At least I have a subject for a video essay. Part 1. The Good. Divorce, gay representation, and gender roles. Divorce is good. This story is about Daniel Hillard, his ex-wife Miranda, and their 3 children. Lydia, 14, Christopher, who just turned 12, and the adorable Natalie, who is 5, played by Maya Wilson, who would telekinese our hearts with Matilda, which gave me unrealistic expectations for child abusers getting their comeuppance. Daniel is a struggling actor who cannot keep a job, and Miranda is the breadwinner who has a successful corporate career, selling housing OCs and ref sheets. The divorce gave Miranda full custody of the children, and Daniel gets visitation rights on Saturdays. The judge tells Daniel that he is willing to consider granting joint custody if Daniel can get a job, keep it, and create a suitable home in 90 days. The court appoints a liaison to help him with this. Daniel finds an apartment and a part-time job as a filing clerk at a TV station, but is depressed because he sees too little of his children. He learns that Miranda is going to hire a nanny to spend time with the children in the hours between them getting home from school and Miranda getting home from work. He cleverly disguises himself as a charming old widow, the titular Mrs Doubtfire, and is hired by Miranda. Much hilarity ensues. In order to keep this position, Daniel learns how to be a better parent and run a household, the very things that would have saved his marriage. Eventually, he is found out. The judge gives Miranda sole custody and Daniel is only allowed to see his children under supervision. This outcome makes everyone unhappy. Meanwhile, Daniel has used his Mrs. Doubtfire character to create a successful television show for children. His own children watch the show so they can see him every day. Miranda sees all of this and her heart grows 3 sizes. She tells whoever it is that has the legal authority, don't ask me who, I'm not a lawologist, and sets up an arrangement so that Daniel can spend time with the children every day after school, just like he did when he pretended to be Mrs. Doubtfire. First, let's get this out of the way. Yes, it is hypocritical of me, critical Q facts, to complain about how assuming a fictional character's identity can be profoundly good for your personal growth. Prototype has asked me to mention that they have not grown as a person at all since making the Twitter account, and here we are now. So let's start with some things that this film does right. It is still liked by a lot of LGBTQ+ people to this day, even though it is, let's say, flawed. The movie portrays divorce as for the best in the long run when spouses just can't get along. Miranda is framed as justified, reasonable, and responsible as she files for divorce. She, the children, and even Daniel end up much happier and fulfilled as a result. And as an added bonus, Daniel becomes a better parent who gives his children structure rather than just trying to be their playmate. As he starts doing his part as a parent, while disguised as Mrs. Doubtfire, Miranda can gradually loosen up and be playful around the children, because she is no longer stuck in the role of teacher and direction giver all the time. Divorce being a legitimate and responsible choice for some people, and often for the best, was an important message at the time. And more people were making an effort to put such healthy messages into art that depicted divorce, incompatibility, and separation. More and more families were living with divorce, so family-friendly media about it became important to teach families how to move forward. It turns out people like having art that makes them feel seen in ways they otherwise wouldn't. Who knew? The studio, 20th Century Fox, tried to pressure the screenwriter into giving the film a happy ending where Miranda and Daniel get back together. Screenwriter Randy Mayhem Singer quit in protest and was rehired when the studio could not make a script with a happy ending work. Sources on that in the doodly-doo. Yes, we did research for this episode actually. The film not only shows that divorce can be for the best, it clearly spells out this message in the closing monologue that Daniel gives as Mrs. Doubtfire in response to a letter from the little girl whose parents have split up.
Oh, my dear Katie. You know, some parents, when they're angry, they get along much better when they don't live together. They don't fight all the time, and they can become better people and much better mummies and daddies for you. And sometimes they get back together. And sometimes they don't, dear. And if they don't blame yourself. Just because they don't love each other anymore doesn't mean that they don't love you. Now, there are all sorts of different families, Katie. Some families have one mommy, some families have one daddy, or two families. And some children live with their uncle or aunt, some live with their grandparents, or some children live with foster parents. And some live in separate homes and separate neighborhoods in different areas of the country, and they may not see each other for days, weeks, months, or even years at a time. But if there's love, dear, those are the ties that bind. And you'll have a family in your heart forever. All my love to you, Poppet. You're going to be all right. Bye-bye.
Gay representation. Daniel is able to successfully disguise himself as Mrs. Doubtfire with the help of his gay older brother Frank, who is a gifted FX artist. FX stands for face off, where the X is where the face was, but we took it off because it's a face off.
It's not a trap, it's a face off.
Frank is shown to be in a happy relationship with Jack, a fellow FX artist. Frank and Jack's relationship is fully accepted by Frank's mother, Daniel, and Daniel's children. Frank and Jack are both played by gay actors, Harvey Fierstein and Scott Allen Capurro. That was honestly more LGBTQ representation than I was expecting for the 90s. Given that this was a family movie and I lived through when a gay kiss in Glee was scandalous, and Adam Lambert kissing a dude on stage was provocative. Let's be real, if this movie came out today, all the chuds would say, "It's grooming kids into a gay and trans lifestyle," despite how the messages don't exactly hold up to giving trans people basic dignity and stuff, you know? We sadly never see Frank and his partner interact with Daniel's kids, but we learn that the kids call them Uncle Frank and Aunt Jack. Jack is shown to be a bit stereotypically effeminate. It is perhaps a bit uncomfortable that this gay couple is referred to in heteronormative terms. But at least the movie shows that being in a happy gay relationship is normal and okay for children to know about. That is quite something for a mainstream American film aimed at a younger audience in the early 90s. Again, it's 2023 and drag queen story hours, which are a public service designed to destigmatize gender nonconformity, are getting threatened with violence. In 2022, Harvey Fierstein mentioned in an interview with People magazine that his feelings on gender are complicated. Fierstein says he thinks about whether he's non-binary a lot, and it's the term that bothers me. But let's put it this way, he says with a smile. I don't think I've missed anything by not making up my mind. As someone who is non-binary because I cannot make up my mind, fair enough. Fierstein expressed that he has no intent to transition. So you could say that this film even has some trans representation in the sense that Harvey Fierstein is arguably not cis. You could say that, but if you do, I will reach out through the screen and smack you, because let's be real, he's just not put anything into the movie that feels like it came from in-community. Link to the interview in the doodly-doo, I guess. Gender roles. In terms of gender roles, it is fairly progressive for its time. Much like Barbie, Mrs. Doubtfire is somewhat feminist, albeit the liberal upper middle class kind of feminist. Miranda and Daniel's careers and ambitions are gender flipped, from a patriarchal traditionalist point of view. Miranda is a successful career woman who is the breadwinner of the family, and she's not even presented as unfeminine, nor is it ever suggested that this makes her a bad mother. Daniel, on the other hand, is not interested in a conventional, respectable corporate career, and that is fine. Miranda does not divorce him because he is not a provider, but because he doesn't come through with the responsibilities of being a co-parent. There's a bit later in the film where it talks about how her career is part of how she shows her love to her children, by taking care of their needs and not just enjoying their company, and how his refusal to do the same has cost her that same time with her kids that he spent the whole movie relentlessly pursuing. She wanted quality time with the kids just as badly, but her needs as a mother were unintelligible to him because he was so fixated on his own. His happy ending involved having his own show that pays the bills while having enough time to spend time with his children. Being a dad is the most important thing to him, which is why it's so tragic that he fucked it up. It took charisma only Robin Williams could pull off to be such a sympathetic character in his journey to rekindle his relationship with his kids, through deception and stalking. Even when he does get a job, his eventual professional success is a small part of the greater priority of being with his family. This is presented as good and aspirational, and not at all as unmanly. Take the hint, men. You don't have to throw yourself into the corporate grinder that takes in souls and spits out dollars. You can let your wife... It's beautiful to find fulfillment in family and time together and not with dollars and prestige. After getting divorced, Miranda starts dating James Goldeneye, the 007th, whom she was involved with in the past, but is more comfortable with now that she is in a different stage of her life. Stu is not villainized by the narrative of the film. He is a decent man who obviously cares about Miranda. Daniel resents Stu, but that is because he is jealous and not because Stu is bad for Miranda or the children. Stu does nothing wrong. Daniel, as Mrs. Doubtfire, tries to dissuade Miranda to date again, but he is completely unsuccessful. And credit to the film, it does portray his attempts as immature and toxic. Though I do wish it emphasized more strongly that it was abuse and manipulation, or that it implies he still feels entitled to influence his ex-wife's sex life. Ex-wife's sex life, ex-wife's sex lives. Can you say that like 5 times in a row? As if she were an object and not a person with her own romantic longings. There is every reason to believe Stu and Miranda are still together after the end of the film. Miranda has moved on romantically, and that is fine. Daniel is not with someone else romantically, and that is shown as fine too. So why did rewatching this film make me so uncomfortable? It does not have trans characters in it after all. So how does it manage to be transphobic? Let's take a look at that awful scene, though it should be mentioned that it is not the only case of transphobia in the film. Part 2. The Band. That awful scene and other instances of transphobia and general queerphobia.
R-A-N-C-E.
Bravo. Discriminate.
D-I-S-C-R-I-M-I-N-A-T-E.
Oh, it's very good. Will you excuse me, dear? Call of nature. Right? Check those, I'll be right back.
Oh, God.
Oh, God.
Oh, my God.
Chris, wait.
Lydia, come on. We gotta call the cops. We gotta dial 911 now.
Why?
Well, Mrs. Doubtfire. He's a she.
What?
He's half man, half woman.
What?
Yes, I swear.
All right, everyone. Now, just calm down.
Chris!
Just relax, please.
He's gonna get it.
In the balls.
Yeah.
She's got him. She's got everything.
All right, listen to me. I'm not who you think I am.
Yeah, no shit.
Watch your mouth, young man.
God. Dad?
Yeah.
Dad?
Yeah, honey.
You don't really like wearing that stuff, do you, Dad?
Well, some of it's comfortable. No. It's a pain in the padded ass. This is not a way of life. It's just a job. I don't go to old lady bars or anything like that after work, you know? It's the only way I could see you guys every day.
Who did this?
Uncle Frank and Aunt Jack.
Oh. It's really you in there.
Yeah. Just a mask. And this is a bodysuit. I didn't have any operations or anything.
It's good.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi. Oh, hey. Sorry I scared you. Come here, Chris.
No, it's okay. I get it. I just, don't want to hug you or anything. Not just yet.
It's cool. It's a guy thing.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, this scene feels really out of place in this otherwise mostly whimsical movie. Christopher is not only shocked to learn that Mrs. Doubtfire is not a cis woman, he and Lydia instantly start seeing their beloved nanny and housekeeper as some sort of monster. Panicking, calling 911, and threatening to hit her with a piece of sports equipment are the first things that come to their minds. That is pretty dark. This is the only time that actual violence with real consequences seems possible in this family film, and it's framed as a natural and understandable reaction. The two teens only start to calm down when they learn that she is, in fact, their father. They only relax after Daniel assures them that he is not transgender or someone who enjoys cross-dressing. I repeat, this implies that if Mrs. Doubtfire were a trans woman or a cross-dressing cis man, that it would be a rational and reasonable response to attack her with an improvised weapon. This is straight-up transphobia, and it is presented as a completely fine and normal response. Daniel's reveal could have been used as a short, teachable moment, but no, trans bad. Anyway, Lydia and Christopher now know that Mrs. Doubtfire is their father and promise to keep his secret. Dressing up because you feel it's more in line with who you are on the inside? That's a paddling in the face with a 911. But dressing up so as to fool protective services, your ex-wife, and your kids all just to escape the natural consequences of your negligence? That's family-friendly comedy. The story moves on, and this incident is never mentioned again. Until Daniel is found out at the end, Lydia and Christopher don't behave any differently around Mrs. Doubtfire after this scene. You could shorten this scene to remove the worst transphobia or cut it out altogether, and it would not affect the plot of the rest of the film. Or just have the kids into it that their dad is there and ask him a question that trips him into revealing himself, like Jasmine did with Aladdin in a much better Robin Williams movie. It's not. It's a racist movie. It's really not. Like, I love Aladdin, and I understand why everyone loves Aladdin, but fuck that movie, it's so racist.
Where it's flat and immense and the heat is intense. It's barbaric, but hey, it's home.
This seems like a missed opportunity, particularly in light of how uncomfortable Christopher is with Daniel in the scene, when he is shown greatly enjoying the television show his father builds around this character. Chris seems to have some toxic masculine ideas and or anxieties about gender. But this is never addressed. He just represses it or gets over it, I guess. This film could have strictly played this situation for laughs instead, when Chris walks into his nanny peeing while standing up. Daniel could have immediately said something like, "Oh no," in his normal voice. After a moment of confusion and shock, Chris could have rolled his eyes and been like, "Ugh, Dad, you don't even live here anymore and you still forget to lock the door. Grow up." Cue Daniel explaining himself to Chris and Lydia without anyone making disparaging remarks about being trans or cross-dressing. That would have fit the overall tone of the film a lot better, and it would have maybe had a healthier impact on trans acceptance than hit them with a tennis racket. This scene, as it stands, exists in the context of films with trans women and cross-dressing characters who are killers and/or sexual predators. It assumes that everyone who sees this scene will instantly agree that a trans woman or crossdresser is dangerous. However, this trope originates in horror movies and thrillers that are not aimed at younger audiences. The fact that it appears in a family film means that the scriptwriters considered this an idea that even children are familiar with. It completely normalizes fear of trans women and crossdressers. This is an odd choice for a film that otherwise plays crossdressing for laughs. It is both a symptom and a vector of transphobia, endemic to Western media at the time. I did not grow up in the US. To me and my siblings, this scene completely came out of left field when we first saw it. We understood that Christopher was startled, but him and Lydia threatening violence actually shocked us. To us, cross-dressing was a comedy trope and being trans was this extremely rare medical condition. We thought it was another instance of Americans trying to resolve everything with violence. I had forgotten how bad this scene was until I saw it again. To me, it felt like a slap in the face. Other than the mood whiplash, it makes the film inconsistent as to how it regards cross-dressing. On the one hand, it is presented as whimsical and good fun. Daniel playing Mrs. Doubtfire does not merely help him become a better father. It helps him become a better person. Miranda even says to Daniel's face, after he's been found out, that the character he portrayed was a decent person and demonstrated that he could be one too. In the end, he plays this character in a popular television show aimed at children. In this show, Mrs. Doubtfire is a gender-flipped version of Mr. Rogers. In other words, Daniel's drag persona is considered to be child-friendly and extremely wholesome by a large audience within the world of the movie. But on the other hand, the kids act like it's just common knowledge that whenever someone doesn't conform to gender roles, the only reasonable response is deadly force. So cross-dressing is cool as long as you do it as a performance, or to skirt a custody court order if you're a cis-straight man, I guess? Right after this scene, Daniel tells Lydia and Christopher not to tell their younger sister, Natalie, because she would not understand. Again, implying that cross-dressing is too confusing for young children. The overall message of the film gets even more muddled because it is implied that Natalie knows or strongly suspects Mrs. Doubtfire is her father, because both do voices really well when reading stories to her. She is not shown to be in any way terribly shocked or negatively affected when Daniel is revealed as Mrs. Doubtfire later in the restaurant. She's only sad when she cannot see him every day anymore. So this implies that cross-dressing is mostly fine then? Editing or deleting this scene would take care of this most overt instance of transphobia, but sadly it would not erase other queerphobic sentiments in this film. Which brings us to Transphobia and Queerphobia. There are other instances where the film directly acknowledges that LGBTQ phobia exists and how queer people are unfairly treated as a threat to children. Once again, the tone of the film changes drastically. After Daniel is found out, the judge at the custody ruling refers to Daniel's cross-dressing as a lifestyle, when he rules that Daniel can only see his children under supervision. Lifestyle is an ugly dog whistle. It trivializes our identities and relationships as something we choose on a whim. This is particularly painful because the film takes place in San Francisco, a city that has long been considered a queer haven. It gives you a sense that a queer person is never safe anywhere. Daniel tells Miranda a few weeks or months after the court ruling,
"So what do you want me to do? Want me to pretend like everything's all right, put on a happy face, smile? Jesus, Miranda, you took my children away from me. I can only see them now with supervision. Some woman who comes and watches me with the kids like I'm some sort of deviant. If I try to hug them, she wonders why. You know what that's like? You just sat there in that courtroom. You knew the truth. You didn't say a word. You let that judge pass that despicable sentence."
At the time, it was not unusual for queer people in straight marriages to lose custody over their children when they are divorced. Practicing this lifestyle is still something that can be weaponized against queer people by their cis-het exes during divorce proceedings in many places. Having your children taken away or having your time with them severely restricted is a nightmare that too many queer parents get to live. Daniel asks her if she knows what that is like. and we see that she empathizes, but she does so from a very safe, privileged position, because she is a cis-het woman. She is considered safe per definition, like the cis-woman social worker who supervises Daniel's time with his children. And in my opinion, this movie pulls a Rent and breezes right past addressing a systemic and normalized form of abuse. The movie, and I cannot emphasize this enough, does nothing to condemn a society that would treat some people with a lot of that undue suspicion and surveillance simply for being gay or trans. The problem, as far as the movie is concerned, is that it's happening to a straight, cisgender white dude, and not that this harm is actively happening to loads of other people. Daniel references the sexist notion that cis-het women are assumed not to be a threat to children, and know best even if they are total strangers. That sexist standard does not keep children safe. We as viewers know that the Hillard children are hurting over the situation. Mothers, teachers, social workers, and other women in positions of power over children can and do at times hurt children. Kids are unfairly assumed to be less safe around queer people than cis-het men, and most safe around cis-het women. Daniel is not queer though, but because he does not fully fulfill a traditional male gender role, he is perceived that way. He is a cis-het actor who is wrongly presumed to be other than cis-het. The film is clear that Daniel is unfairly treated as a result of queerphobia, but it strongly implies that this is an injustice in his mind because he is cisgender and heterosexual, not because this prejudice against queer people is wrong. The truth Miranda did not tell in the courtroom is that her cross-dressing was a disguise and not a lifestyle, not part of his identity. Then again, in the end, Daniel chooses to make a living by performing in drag on his television show. He obviously enjoys playing Mrs Doubtfire on a daily basis, while he hated working as a file clerk and kept losing his previous acting jobs. But he's doing it ironically. It's just a prank, bro. When Frank and his partner help Daniel develop his disguise, he first tries to look like a woman closer to his own age with long red nails. But they discard this look because Daniel does not pass and could be too easily recognized by Miranda. You could argue that Daniel is a hypocrite who protests too much. Daniel does not want to be seen as some sort of deviant. So who is a deviant in his mind? Not his gay brother and his partner, although it is strongly implied that they do drag themselves and or have extensive experience applying makeup to drag queens. When Daniel asks his brother for help, they have the following interaction.
Daniel, hi.
Could you make me a woman?
Honey, I'm so happy. Oh, come here.
I know you'd understand.
This suggests that Frank has wanted to bond with Daniel by applying makeup to him or make him do drag for ages. Like the current gender criticals and pick-me gays, Daniel makes a distinction between the respectable gays and the deviant queers that falls apart on further examination. From what he said to Christopher and Lydia, he applies the deviant label to transgender women who medically transition and assigned male-at-birth persons who cross-dress for other reasons than performance. The terms these scenes very loudly do not say are cross-dressing as a fetish and autogynephilia. Did we do an episode on Ray Blancard yet? We're gonna do a special deep dive episode into Blancard and his typology when we reach 5,000 subscribers. Don't miss it! This ad was sponsored by Vanilla Coke. Smooth going down. In recent years, these terms have been more widely popularized by gender critics and other trans haters, but they were around in 1993. As said before, the trope of trans women and cross-dressers as serial killers and sexual predators was part of the popular consciousness in the US. This notion was so commonplace in the US that I honestly do not think that the scriptwriters and censors thought about it twice. Mrs Doubtfire initially received a PG-13 rating in the US and 12 in the UK, but this was due to language and a slut-shamey joke Daniel makes to Stu, Miranda's new love interest. Most bigotry is mainstream, and as long as it is phrased politely, the censors have zero interest in protecting children from its psychological harm. Part 3. Daniel as a character, his dubious ethics and unfortunate implications. The pain that the court ruling causes the children and Daniel conveniently distracts most viewers from certain other ethical considerations in regards to Daniel's actions throughout the story. He manipulates and lies to Miranda and his children to get what he wants. He may sincerely love his children, but he does hurt them by lying to them. Mrs. Doubtfire is a grandmotherly figure to the children, and Miranda considers her a friend. They are genuinely sad when they learn that this person they love and thought they knew never existed. They watch Daniel's television show because they miss Mrs. Doubtfire and their father. Furthermore, Daniel as Mrs. Doubtfire tries to manipulate Miranda into not dating Stu. But just because he did not succeed in manipulating his ex does not make it any less deplorable that he tried.
Attempted murder. Now honestly, what is that? Do they give a Nobel Prize for attempted chemistry, do they?
Later on, he almost gets Stu killed when he intentionally contaminates Stu's food with something he is allergic to. This is called poisoning someone, and it is extremely freaking wrong and can, as it almost was in the movie, be deadly or have lifelong consequences. Daniel saves Stu in time because he did not intend for his prank to be fatal. Stu apparently forgives him because they shake hands afterwards, but then again, it is possible Stu does not fully realize what Daniel did. The narrative glosses over the fact that feeding someone an allergen is literally poisoning them.
I have the poached salmon.
Yes, ma'am. And you, sir?
I'll have the jambalaya. And make mine not spicy. I'm allergic to pepper.
Not spicy, certainly, sir.
Thank you. Cheers, your health.
Hot jambalaya!
Delightfully devilish, Seymour.
Oh, he's choking. He's choking. He's choking. Help us. Help. We need a doctor. He's choking. He's choking. Help us. Oh, God. Oh, God. He's choking here. Call
Oh no, I killed the bastard.
Attempted murder.
This is not behavior you should present to children or even adults as harmless. I know someone who almost died of anaphylactic shock at work because their food got contaminated by a careless colleague. Miranda calls Daniel out for lying to her in general terms when he is found out, but not for the full extent of the pain and harm he causes. She fails to point out that his deceit is setting a horrible example to his children. More importantly, Daniel does not show remorse over his actions. He never sincerely apologizes. Again, plenty of viewers miss this because Daniel does suffer consequences for his actions. He loses Miranda and he temporarily loses his children. His grief is sincere when Miranda speaks to him after the second court ruling, but that is because he feels wronged and misses his children. He does not reciprocate the empathy Miranda shows him. She is in tears when she sees his pain. We never see this in Daniel. There is a pattern here. When Daniel is at his worst, he is performing traditional masculinity. He is possessive of his wife and children and does not admit it when he is clearly in the wrong, and he is never called out for this. The best we get is Daniel thanking Miranda for making the joint custody happen in the end, and him accepting that their relationship is over. My point is not that the entire plot of Mrs. Doubtfire is irredeemable. You can use this concept to write a script that does not endorse the bad things Daniel does. A Christmas Carol, Groundhog Day, and Iron Man all have protagonists who start out as jerks that do bad things, and through hardship, learn some humility and become better people. This type of story lends itself very well to comedy because the main character can get up to all kinds of wacky shenanigans, including some very morally questionable acts. and still come out as someone we can root for. Comedy can encourage positive behavior by exaggerating and mocking the opposite. That's also kinda what we're trying to do with our channel. I think that both the scriptwriters and the late Robin Williams did not intend to punch down at trans people, but that they were not sufficiently aware of their own biases and insecurities. They are not completely comfortable with Daniel's gender nonconformity, nor armed with the right philosophy to question common misinformation such as trans people being dangerous. The script was revised when Robin Williams was cast and he was given considerable room to improvise. Robin Williams didn't really display any willful bigotry, but he had a big ego. Daniel is a Robin Williams self-insert. Like Williams, Daniel is an actor who likes doing voices, is very good at improv, and likes playing pranks. The world revolves around him. The narrative can let Daniel be sensitive and somewhat vulnerable, but the film cannot bring itself to have him admit fault, not even to himself. He overshadows everyone on screen, save for Miranda and Frank. The writers and Robin Williams treat Daniel's love for his children as a justification for his actions rather than the driving force behind his redemption. Daniel's arc remains shallow because unlike Ebenezer Scrooge and Phil Connors, Daniel is never truly humbled. He's more responsible, but he never dug deep to ask himself, why was I unwilling to make dinner to help my wife spend more time with the kids, but I was willing to do that in drag to make sure I got to see them? The real protagonist is Miranda. Sent tweet.
Actually, it's called a post now.
Ebenezer Scrooge is shown children who suffer thanks to his heartless ideology. Both children in a general systemic sense, and a child he personally knows. Both the spirits of Christmas present and future convey to Scrooge that Tiny Tim will die if Scrooge does not mend his ways. Phil Connors in Groundhog Day tries everything he can think of to save a homeless man, and he keeps failing in spite of the fact that he can live the same day over and over. The only thing he can do is accept that this old man is dying and make his final day a bit better. This is when Phil decides to embrace empathy to show more genuine kindness to people instead of manipulating them to his own ends. On the other hand, Daniel does not have his heart broken when he sees another person suffer because of his own actions or his complicity in a bad system. Daniel could have had an "oh no, what have I done" moment over Stu if, for instance, Miranda or his young daughter Natalie had been shown sobbing brokenheartedly because they thought Stu was dying, or his son Chris losing friends because, like his father, he uses lies and charm to get away with things until the other person is completely fed up. That would fit because Daniel is not shown to have actual friends in the film. He is only close to people who are part of his family, such as his ex, his brother, and his children. Daniel does not come to the realization that he has to do better for both his sake and the well-being of his children. As a result, Daniel does not grow that much as a person. He develops better skill sets in regards to parenting and housekeeping. Granted, that is a lot more than most divorced man-children manage. Daniel, for his faults, does earn his happy ending by being a good enough parent. That doesn't mean that empathy does not save the day in Mrs Doubtfire. Miranda agrees to joint custody because she sees that the children and Daniel are in pain. She does empathize and is willing to set her justified anger for the greater good. In doing so, she does conform to traditional feminine expectations. I would have preferred her doing the right thing while not forgiving Daniel. The ultimate unintended moral of this film is that it is good that society has relaxed gender roles, but that people who stray too far from the beaten gendered paths should be branded as deviants. Verdict. How does it hold up? Could it be remade? I'm gonna be blunt here. I feel like this movie came off super wholesome at the time, but as more information has come into public knowledge about trans people, the movie ages like unpasteurized milk that was on the floor after the cat threw it up. I watched it with a binary trans friend who said it just felt gross throughout. And this is someone who feels that I'm being a buzzkill when I point out that Harry Potter lady bad. But despite being very problematic, some parts of the film hold up mostly well. It has its heart in the right place. It was willing to take chances by stating that divorce is a good thing. that it is sometimes for the best for both children and parents. It does not vilify Daniel and Miranda for abandoning traditional gender roles. It showed a gay couple played by gay men who were on good terms with their relatives. It has a man who earns his happy ending by becoming a better father. If I watched this film with kids in my family or children of friends, first I would apologize, and then I would discuss that one scene and the other instances of transphobia. I would explain to a cis-het friend why certain aspects of this film make trans people uncomfortable, but also why many queer people nevertheless like it. Rocky Horror doesn't exactly have a positive or healthy meaning inside it, and it's all a darling because it's fun and it doesn't have to have positive messages. And on the other hand, toxic and wrong social messages, mixed in with healthy ones, is its own kind of uncomfortable for me. Like when someone uses an ableist slur to denounce homophobia. If a trans person who has not yet watched this film asked me whether I recommend it, I would give them a content warning and talk to them to check whether certain things might trigger them, and then advise them not to watch it unless they really need a 90s family movie and they're already out of Jumanji. I have come here to spend time with family and watch family movies. And I'm all out of family. Movies, all out of family movies. I think that this film could be rewritten while retaining most of its wacky hijinks without endorsing transphobia, toxic masculinity, and oppressive gender roles. It would not be easy to get it remade that way in the current climate where conservatives try to sexualize all drag, but I do think it could be done. It's ironic that the anti-drag crowd would resent this movie for its portrayal of divorce, since Miranda is exercising rights that she is justified in having and using. Transphobia and misogyny are both social pressures designed and promoted so as to control people into doing reproductive labor instead of deciding for ourselves what we want out of our lives. So it's a bummer that this movie was willing to resist patriarchy, but not too much. Not the parts of it that don't target cisheads. The original was made the way it was because the scriptwriter was unwilling to compromise on its message concerning divorce. A musical based on this film is still being performed on stage. I think that remaking the story into a miniseries or even a television show could work if you wanted to explore certain issues around gender and parenting in more depth, and give characters such as the children and Frank more development. Also, if you could make it a success, it would really piss off transphobes, which is a big plus in my book. Bring on the Drag Queen Story Hour happy ending. Speaking of happy ending, we would really appreciate if you could leave a like on this video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. I know you probably hear this a lot on YouTube, but small channels like us really do benefit from this, and it helps us grow. As for me, my name is Sapphire Bones, and I've been the voice of CritFacts for this episode. I have my own YouTube channel where I make video game essays and soon-to-be board game essays. Go and check out my 1 hour-long essay on why Broken Sword: The Shadow of the Templars is a great game that is heavily flawed. If you want to follow me, you can do so on Twitter at Sapphire_Bones. See you all there! And I'm giving this one a 4 out of 10, though it's closer to a 3 than it is to a 5.